Courageous Sisters exist to help Christian women right across our world who are probably living in much more difficult circumstances than we are. The vision really of Courageous Sisters is to enable women become self-sufficient to the point where they're actually able to help others around them. If you were at Courage last year, you will remember me talking about the story of a lady I met in Zambia. Her name is Harriet. Harriet was married and had 2 children. And tragically, Harriet's husband died. Harriet was left to look after her 2 children. And she managed to set up a very small business, or a hairdressing business, where she was making some money to look after herself and her children after the death of her husband. Harriet returned to work one day to find out her shop had burnt to the ground. Now we're talking about a situation where there's no welfare, there's no help, so really she was left destitute. Harriet's 2 children had to go and live in the village with relatives, and Harriet was really trying very hard to scrape together a living for herself. When I met Harriet, she was sleeping on the floor of a shop just by the roadside, and really had very difficult circumstances, and was very, very worried about how she was going to pull herself out of it. Well, last year at Courageous Sisters, we raised up an offering. And it just fills me with so much joy to be able to come back and to report to you that Harriet is doing so well. She's been able to restart her hairdressing business. And not only has she been able to restart it, she's been able to employ 2 women from the church to work in the business as well. Harriet now lives in a flat, and she uses her flat to run a small group for the church. And Harriet really is living a whole new life, and she's so much more happy, and she really is grateful for all the help and support she's got. I'm reminded of another lady I met in Zimbabwe. Her name is Sikwela. Sikwela is a mum of 2 again, who she is a woman who lives in the house, like a home for destitute women. Sikwela lives with HIV. And she hadn't been able to work for a very long time. But as her health improved, she really wanted to be able to start up her own business. The money raised by Courageous Sisters has gone towards helping Sikwela. She's now started off a small business where she goes to South Africa to buy goods and brings them back to Zimbabwe to sell. Sikwela is now well on her way to looking after herself and her 2 children and to becoming self-sufficient. The one story that really fills me with so much joy is this year I had the privilege of going to Sirenje in Zambia. Sirenje is a small town in Zambia, and in Sirenje there is a secondary school. And what tends to happen is that all the smaller villages around will send their children to Sirenje to attend school. But it's such a far journey for the girls that they actually need somewhere to live within Sirenje. Now, a lot of the girls, the situation was that they were going to secondary school in Sirenje, but were living in what we would say would be unsuitable places while they were during term time. What was then happening was a lot of the girls were falling pregnant because men were just really taking advantage of them, and they weren't looked after at all. A church in the UK, Kira's Church, heard of the plight of the girls in Sirenje, and they kindly built a hostel for the girls. And they really wanted another church to come alongside and just help support the work that they're doing. And so once again, it's such a privilege to be able to support such an amazing work. Courageous Sisters have been able to go there and really just help in the funding of the hostel, making sure that it keeps open and that there's a matron there that's able to look after the girls. And also fund some of the girls to actually stay there. It costs about £50 a term for a girl to remain in the hostel. And some of these girls, their parents can't even afford that. So what tends to happen is that when the money runs out, the girls go back to the village, and that's the end of their education. So to be able to ensure that these girls get a good education, they're so hungry to be taught, they're so hungry to learn. And so Courageous Sisters has been able to fund girls, not only just to fund the running and the upkeep of the hostel, but also to be able to fund girls who probably couldn't afford to stay in the hostel. And it was such a privilege to meet some of the girls this year, and some of the gifts that we were able to buy and take over there. Some of the things were just such small gifts, but the girls just received them with such joy. I mean, there was just joy all over in the camp. I was able to stay with the girls, eat with them, talk to them, and just really watch as their faces really just lit up. And it was just such a joy and a privilege to do that.